Good afternoon, this is Matthew Lindsay with Precision Home Group here in Anchorage. Coming to you live every day to talk to you about real estate, business, and life. Today we are talking about money. We are talking about the secret fees. We're talking about when you are going to have to bring money to the table in a real estate transaction, whether that's on the buy side, you're purchasing a property, or the sell side, trying to sell your property. Not too many people are going to tell you when you have to bring money to the table, at what times, how much, and what it's going to cost you in the long run. So that's what we're breaking down today, is to run over all the fees, when you have to pay them, and what that looks like. So we're going to talk about the buy side and the sell side. We're going to start with buyers today. So when you're purchasing a home, a condo, a multifamily property, anything with a residential mortgage loan, there's going to be some times that you have to bring money to the table. You have to write a check. You have to spend your money before you close on that property. Now, when many people think of buying a home, they think, oh, I just got to bring the down payment and that's it, right? That is incorrect. That is bad information. There's a lot more money to be spent rather than just the down payment. People think, oh, I can get in a multifamily property, it's going to cost me zero down, I have a VA loan. Or FHA loan, and I have 3.5% down, So there's other costs associated with that. So we're going to talk about that now. So the first time you sit down to write an offer on a property, that's the first time that you got to bring money to the table. This is what's called earnest money. Typically, this money is about 1% of the list price of the home. So for a $100,000 property, like a condo maybe, that would be $1,000 you'll be writing. For $1 million, it'd be $10,000. You can do the math, it's pretty simple. So this check gets submitted with the offer. And what this is saying is, hey, I have some skin in the game, I'm serious about this property, and I'm going to put this down to show you that. This money does go towards the down payment at the end of the day if you go through the contract, everything works out, and you close on the property. This actually goes towards the down payment, not in addition to. But it is money you have to bring to the table before you close on the property, so that's why we bring it up today. The second time you have to bring money to the table as a buyer is actually during the inspection phase. Now, here in Alaska, here in Anchorage, it's very common for the buyer to pay for the inspection of the property. Sometimes the seller may get one before they list it on the market, or other circumstances, maybe there's one been done on the property already. But most of the time, the buyer is going to pay for the inspection. Now, this is just an estimate. You're going to have to go check in with your real estate agent. You're going to have to check in with other inspectors in your area. But what I see on average is about $450 per property. It can go up from there. And that's just a small property, okay? If you get into multifamily with more units, if you get into older homes, it will be more money. $450 is the bottom line, okay? So just keep that in mind. Also, the next time you'll have to bring money in is for the re-inspection. Now, this is up to you as the buyer. When we go through the process of buying a home, you're going to get the inspection. Then, once you have that done, you're going to negotiate over the repairs with the seller. They will complete repairs, and it would behoove you as the buyer to order a re-inspection of the property. You have the option to do that or go through the property yourself. Now, I see a lot of people who want to save a little bit of money. They go through, they just visually inspect the items that were on the repair list themselves because they consider themselves a handyman, maybe in the construction industry and things like that. However, more times than not, they miss something. So this re-inspection is highly important because it brings the same inspector out from the first time, the second time, to inspect the repairs done. Now, this re-inspection doesn't cost anywhere near as much as what the original one does, even though it's only $450. The second re-inspection is $150. So for so little money, it would behoove you just to pay the fee and get them in there and protect you and the home that you're purchasing or whatever type of property it is. Now, the next time you have to bring any money down is at closing. So during the pending process, during the process that you have waiting to close on the home, you're going to pay the 1% earnest money. You're going to pay the inspection fee, which is $450. You're going to pay the re-inspection, which is $150. And then the rest of the money gets paid at closing, which is going to be the rest of your down payment in addition to that earnest money. Also, any closing fees. Now, depending on the loan type and your situation, there is going to be closing fees. You can sometimes negotiate the seller to help pay some of those out of the proceeds of the home, but it's not always the case. I always recommend going into a deal with enough money for the down payment and enough money for all closing fees in case the seller doesn't cover any. Now, typically we're going to see about 2 to 3% of the home purchase price in closing fees. So keep that in mind. You can do the math on what that is going to be. So that is the buy side. Those are some of the costs associated with buying a home. There are a couple others for certain circumstances and stuff like that. So keep that in mind and ask your real estate agent what those may be for your specific situation, or reach out to me at any time. Now we're going to talk about seller. Now the seller accrues way more cost in selling a home, a lot more. That is where most of the transactions fees are paid out of, and that's from the seller. So the seller doesn't just have, okay, we got an offer and move forward, right? They have some fees associated with getting it on the market, getting it ready to sell, and then once we get an offer, some further fees. So we're going to start from the beginning and move all the way towards the end, which is the closing. So the first thing you're going to have is you're going to have real estate commissions. So if you're using a realtor, many times that commission is going to be about 6%. 6% of that purchase price of that home at the end of the day. That's not paid for until the home sells. So you're not paying a realtor until he actually performs the action of selling the home. So just keep in mind though that is paid at closing 6%. That is what the common fee is. So we also, some realtors charge a marketing fee or a transaction fee. This is not a standard practice. This is what some realtors charge. It is optional. It is not something you have to pay. Okay, so when you have a realtor, you're working with them, they ask you about a transaction fee or a marketing fee, ask them what it is, have them break it down, have them show you what that goes to. You are paying them 6%, which is split between buy side and sell side. So that realtor that's listing your home should be getting 3% of that commission. So let's see what that transaction fee covers in addition to that 3% you're already giving them. So behoove you to check that out. The second thing that we have here is some of the title company fees once we close on the property. You also have an as-built, and what this is called, well, it's called the as-built, but what it is, it's an engineer's drawing of your property. It shows the property lines, all permanent fixtures on that property itself, and it will give you measurements to property lines from those. You also have the well and septic test if that is something that is on your property. Most people here in Anchorage are tied into city or municipality water and sewer, but if you're up on the hillside, maybe outside of that, maybe you're in the valley, other places, well and septic is very common, so there's some fees for that as well. Here in Anchorage, you gotta get the municipality approval on that, gotta get engineers going for that. Could cost upwards of $1,200 plus some if you need any repairs or changes to your existing well and septic. So keep that in mind. Also, we have closing costs. So we talked about the kind of the title fees. We also have some closing costs for the seller. Additional closing costs if the seller is covering any of the closing costs for the buyer. So keep that in mind as well. Most offers these days come asking for assistance for closing costs from the buyer. So these are all closing fees. These all get paid out at the end of the transaction. It's not money out of your pocket. So again, those were the title company fees, those were the commissions, those were the as-built, the well and septic test, and buyer closing costs. So what costs you money during the transaction? We're going to talk about that right now. So during the transaction, once you get an offer, there are some times that the seller has to pay money before we close the deal. So the first time that's going to be is the appraisal. Now here in Anchorage, it's common practice for a seller to pay for the appraisal. It's not always the case. Sometimes the buyer pays for it. Sometimes there's certain loan types or lenders that actually front that cost until closing. But more often than not, sellers end up paying for the appraisal. And that usually runs about $800 depending on which appraiser does it and who orders it. So that gets paid out about halfway through the transaction. And that is a fee that will have to be paid, and most of the time cannot wait until closing. The second one is going to be repairs. Now, once you negotiate the inspection repair items to be done on the home, you need to implement and start and get those repair items done before the property closes. There are some contractors that will hold that bill until closing. They'll be paid out at closing, so there's no money out of your pocket as the seller. But there is also contractors out there that want to be paid upon completion of the job. So work with your real estate agent, work with your realtor in regards to finding a contractor that will help you with your specific situation. If you can pay for that out of pocket, great. If not, look for somebody that can do that out of closing. So this one is up in there. It's negotiable whether it's a cost during pending process or at closing, but it is something to think about. The next one is the HVAC inspection. Now, most of the time in the inspection report, it's going to call out for your boiler, your furnace, your hot water heater, any of these systems to be cleaned, inspected, and serviced if it hasn't been done within that year. 90% of homes in the area don't do this annually. So when you call out an HVAC company to come out and clean, inspect, and service your HVAC system, they like to be paid upon completion. There is a couple small companies that will hold that off, that bill or invoice off until closing, but most of the time they want to be paid on job completion. That would be about $250. We're also looking at if you have a failed reinspection. So we talked about the inspection. The buyer pays for $450 for the first one, and then they're going to pay $150 for that inspector to come back and check out all those repair items. Now, if that reinspection fails, it wasn't done up to code, the contractor didn't do all the work, he failed to do something, and it failed that reinspection, then at that point, the seller is going to pay for that second reinspection. So that is another accrued cost, usually about that $150. And then additionally, we have the resale cert. Now, this could be paid out at closing as well. That's about $250 plus depending on whether you can get it recertified or not. So, break this all down. What does the seller have to pay during the transaction? He's going to be paying the appraisal, possibly the repairs, possibly the HVAC company to do their cleaning, service, and inspection, and possibly a failed reinspection if they don't do the repairs correct the first time, and possibly a resale cert for $250. All else can be paid at closing, and some of these can as well. So this has been all the different costs associated with the purchase or with the sale of a home. If you have any questions about these, what you could expect to gain from the sale of your home, what fees to pay, or what you can do to prep your property to get on the market, please give me a call at 907-302-1011. Again, always here for you, and thanks for joining.